Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Herridge in Washington, and thanks for streaming. Here's a look at the stories we're tracking right now. A search for answers as officials try to figure out what caused the Titan submersible to implode during its dive to the Titanic. We have an update on recovery efforts as the world mourns the 5 victims.
Yeah, I can't wait to wear my first Spurs jersey.
And we're getting a new look at the NBA's 2023 class. We have a recap of the historic draft. And Kid Capri is a pioneer of DJing. He joins us later to talk about 50 years of hip-hop and the BET Awards this weekend. But first, breaking news from the front lines of the war in Ukraine. A paramilitary group funded by a Russian oligarch that has been fighting alongside Vladimir Putin now claims it's been attacked by Russia. The leader of the Wagner Group is now threatening mutiny, but it's not clear whether this could be part of a disinformation operation. Here's more from our Ian Lee.
Catherine, there is no love lost between the head of the Wagner mercenary group and Russia's defense ministry. But tonight, the war of words has exploded into public. Yevgeny Prigozhin, who leads the Wagner mercenary group, has accused the Russian Ministry of Defense of a deadly missile strike on his troops, allegedly killing dozens. In an audio message on social media, he's vowed to march for justice and punish those responsible. Russia's defense ministry has denied the attack, while Russian state media says Prigozhin has been accused of calling for an armed rebellion. President Putin's spokesman says the Kremlin's leader was aware of the situation and all necessary measures were being taken. This is an extraordinary public escalation of infighting inside Russia over how the war is being fought. Catherine?
Ian Lee in Dnipro, Ukraine. Thank you for your reporting. As families mourn the loss of their loved ones aboard the Titan submersible, officials are now investigating what went wrong. An international coalition remains on site, scouring the Atlantic Ocean for more debris from the vessel. CBS News correspondent Roxana Saberi brings us the latest.
The search for the submersible survivors is now a search for answers, as investigators analyze debris found on the ocean floor to find out what went wrong.
Well, you can X-ray pieces to check for tiny cracks that might develop in the metal.
David Marquet is a retired Navy submarine captain.
It's going to be hard to distinguish, well, was this because it blew apart?
The Coast Guard says the 22-foot Titan broke into fields of debris, including its nose cone and both ends of the pressure hull, made of carbon fiber and titanium. The hull likely imploded under what Marquet says is water pressure amounting to the weight of the Empire State Building.
Did carbon fiber present a risk?
We don't have a lot of experience. What happens when it gets frozen and compressed and then warmed and relaxed?
Titanic director James Cameron is an expert on deep water exploration. He also felt the use of carbon fiber posed a risk.
I was very suspect of the technology that they were using. I wouldn't have gotten in that sub.
There are growing questions tonight that safety concerns were ignored by OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush, who was piloting the Titan and is among those killed. Here he is brushing off warnings in 2021.
I mean, the carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did. It's picking the rules that you break that are the ones that will add value to others and add value to society.
Deep sea expert Rob McCallum says Rush also dismissed his safety concerns.
He took it as a personal insult, a personal threat. No one should ever take safety as a personal threat.
Now family members of the 5 people killed in the Titan implosion are mourning their loved ones. John Pascal lost his stepfather, Paul-Henri Nargeolet.
I think it means a lot that he spent his final moments, near a scene in the world that meant so much to him.
Roxana Saberi is with us now. Roxana, let's turn back to that interview with Rob McCallum, pardon me. What else did he tell you about his conversations and what concerned him?
Well, Catherine, he told us that he had told Stockton Rush a few years ago that he was concerned about the quality of the materials that Rush was using in building the Titan, mainly building with carbon fiber, as we mentioned in the piece. And McCallum said that Rush was paying passengers in danger by using that kind of material. He also highlighted the fact that Rush was buying products off the shelves of stores like Home Depot and Amazon to use in the submersible. And McCollum says he was alarmed about the culture at Ocean Gate. He says anytime anyone raised a safety concern there, that Rush would take it as a personal affront. But the main thing McCollum said was that Rush didn't go through the usual process of certifying the Titan, which would have required meeting certain safety standards. And when I asked McCollum if there should actually be more regulations on these kind of vehicles required by law, he said, well, there should be, but if Rush had followed rules and standards, this would not have happened. Catherine?
And in our final few seconds, Roxana, what will the next stage of this investigation look like?
Well, the Coast Guard says experts will analyze the debris they've been finding on the ocean floor, trying to figure out when the implosion happened and how. We also know that both Canada and the U.S. have now launched investigations into the implosion of the Titan to answer some of those questions. Catherine?
Roxana Saberi, thank you for your extraordinary reporting all week long on this very sad story. Thank you. Friday, Attorney General Merrick Garland denied whistleblower claims that the Justice Department interfered in the Hunter Biden investigation, maintaining that David Weiss had full authority over the case. A strong signal of family support for Hunter Biden attending a White House state dinner after his plea deal on tax charges earlier this week, as a Republican-led House committee releases testimony from 2 IRS whistleblowers, alleging the evidence supported felony tax evasion charges, more serious than the deal cut by the president's son.
There seems to be a real contradiction between what the whistleblower is reporting and what the U.S. attorney has agreed to.
One of the IRS whistleblowers, Gary Shapley, told congressional investigators under oath, I am alleging with evidence that the Justice Department provided preferential treatment, slow-walked the investigation, did nothing to avoid obvious conflicts of interest. The allegations went further that the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney David Weiss was blocked from bringing charges in Washington, D.C., California, and sought special counsel status, a claim denied by the Attorney General.
The only person with authority to make somebody a special counsel or refuse to make somebody a special counsel is the Attorney General. Mr. Weiss never made that request to me.
Garland strongly disputed allegations of interference and left the door open for Weiss to answer Congress's questions.
I would support Mr. Weiss explaining or testifying on these matters.
Shapley also claimed there was a recovered 2017 WhatsApp message from Hunter Biden apparently sent to a Chinese businessman over an outstanding payment, stating, quote, I am sitting here with my father. We would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Hunter Biden allegedly texted, according to the transcript. If true, this would seem to contradict comments from President Biden that he was not involved in his son's business deals. CBS News has not independently confirmed the text. After the Attorney General spoke, the whistleblower said his claims about interference can be corroborated. Hunter Biden's lawyer did not address CBS News' specific questions about the whistleblower allegations. In a statement, his attorney said any suggestion the investigation was not thorough, cut corners, or cut his client slack are, quote, preposterous and deeply irresponsible. President Biden signed an executive order Friday aimed at expanding access to birth control. It comes one day before the U.S. marks a year since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and put other laws, including the right to contraception, potentially in threat. The executive order directs government agencies to ensure private health insurers cover all birth control that's been approved by the FDA. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang joins us now. So, Weijia, what does this executive order do?
Catherine, this is largely symbolic because we're talking about a lot of directives. We're talking about asking the heads of several different agencies, including Health and Human Services, Treasury, and Labor, to ensure that private health carriers, as you just mentioned, have access to their patients to make sure they have these, contraceptive opportunities and options. But I think it really points to the fact that the president's executive power is limited when it comes to actually, legalizing or codifying abortion rights and contraceptive rights, which is, of course, still wrapped up in the courts. And so even though the president did sign this executive order, it doesn't really have any teeth when it comes to that. It's all about expanding contraception on the federal level. There is no timeline for when, these directives have to be completed. And so I think, again, it's just a reminder that even though the president is trying to do what he can when it comes to actually changing or reversing the decision, that's something he cannot do.
So in other White House news, the Indian Prime Minister Modi attended more events at the White House as part of his state visit. What was the focus on Friday?
That's right. Before he left town, the prime minister had a meeting with President Biden, along with several CEOs of top tech companies, including Google and Apple. And this is really meant to talk about competition, to talk about ways that the U.S. and India can work together. And at the core of it, Catherine, just like so much of the president's foreign policy, it is about moving away from China and trying to isolate China economically, especially with regard to technology, looking ahead. And so this was a meeting to talk about different opportunities for these two companies to work together when it comes to the tech space. Now, of course, the backdrop of all of this is the big question about human rights, because this particular Prime Minister, Modi, has been accused of not being a champion for diversity of religion and for some human rights abuses even. And so the president has had to walk that really fine line to say that he's had discussions behind closed doors about democratic values and human rights, but certainly publicly, it's all about competition and the economy and shoring up this relationship between the U.S. and India. Catherine?
Zhang, yeah, thank you very much for your reporting this week. The Supreme Court has rejected a challenge to the Biden administration's immigration policy. Texas and Louisiana had argued that authorities should be able to deport any person who crosses the border illegally. The justices ruled 8-1, denying that claim. The policy will continue to focus on deporting immigrants with serious criminal convictions and those deemed national security threats. Interstate 95 in Philadelphia partially reopened Friday, less than 2 weeks after a deadly collapse. 3 temporary lanes will serve motorists until work on a permanent replacement bridge is complete. Speaking during a news conference, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro commended crews for getting the lanes open ahead of schedule.
We rebuilt I-95 in just 12 days, and through that process, we showed the nation what Philadelphia and Pennsylvania are all about. And I must say, it's a great road. I just drove over it to get here.
President Biden called Governor Shapiro about the reopening, which involved federal, state, and local agencies. In Colorado, multiple major roads were closed Friday after a night of intense rain and flooding. One bridge is even, quote, non-existent after the bout of severe weather. State troopers are urging residents to stay home if possible and warning not to drive through floodwaters. Coming up, a 7-foot-tall teen gets drafted to the NBA as the #1 pick. We'll have his story and the rest of the highlights from that event. Plus, did you eat something bad or do you have a food sensitivity? We've got some news you can use with a nutritionist after the break. You're streaming CBS News. 5 former Memphis police officers charged in the death of Tyree Nichols appeared in court Friday. They face multiple charges, including second-degree murder and aggravated assault. All 5 pleaded not guilty in February. Nichols' family was in the courtroom for the day's proceedings. CBS News correspondent Elise Preston joins me now with more. So, Elise, tell us what happened in court and how this case has developed.
Well, Catherine, this is the first time that we have seen the officers in court in months. This was just their second court appearance since this case began in January, since Tyree Nichols died January 10th. So this is the second time that we have seen the officers. It was a very brief procedural hearing. There were a couple motions that were discussed. No decisions were made today, but there are several motions on the table. Number one, the 5 former officers want to stop the release of several hundred documents. Those include audio clips, video clips from the night of January 7th. The district attorney says that we have seen the majority of what happened. We saw the horrific beating caught on tape by the Sky Cop cameras, but the audio clips and the video clips give us different angles, and we understand that there's 20 additional hours of video there. The officers are trying to stop the release of that. And there's also a motion on the table because 2 of the officers want separate trials. Here's what Tyree Nichols' mother told us exclusively about having to sit through multiple trials.
I don't agree with that because my family and my children have gone through a lot. And this is just the beginning of it all. So you want me to sit through 3 of them in one trial and then sit through another trial and another trial? No, that's not going to happen.
Now, those motions have been tabled until August, Catherine.
So, Elise, it was a brief hearing. Take us inside that courtroom and the mood.
Very brief, but very emotional for Tyree Nichols' family, his siblings who live in California. It was their first time in the courtroom, first time seeing those officers involved in his death. Take a listen to his brother.
Doing all this court stuff is giving them more power to hurt my family still. My family don't want to see them. You know, like we don't want to see them at all. But at the same time, like I understand it's a process to this, so we're just gonna have to deal with it. And I'm gonna be as strong as I can for my family.
Now, the family says that they have been trying to control their emotions these past several months. It has been very difficult. But I can tell you, Catherine, as soon as those 5 officers walked through that courtroom door, his sisters were overcome with emotion and just began crying uncontrollably. Catherine?
Please, Preston, thank you for your reporting. So important to hear from the family, especially now. Thank you. According to the CDC, an estimated 8% of children in the U.S. are affected by food allergies. That's about 1 in 13 children, the equivalent of 2 kids per classroom. Food allergy symptoms are most common in babies and children, but they can appear at any age. For more, let's bring in Dr. Daryl Joffrey. He's a celebrity nutritionist, gut health expert, and author of Get Off Your Sugar. More on that in just 1 second. So, Doctor, what's the difference between a food allergy and a food sensitivity?
Well, food allergies are an immediate response. So in other words, we eat a specific food, and then, like, say that's like a peanut, for example, and then the body recognizes that as a toxin, a poison, as non-self. So what it does is it ramps up its immune system. It creates antibodies to attack that food because it wants to break it down. It wants to get it out of the body before it causes more damage. So the response of that is the body's going to get inflammation. It's going to swell. You can get other symptoms like hives and rashes on your skin, but more serious symptoms like labored breathing and, one of the worst, an anaphylactic reaction. Now, food sensitivities, on the other hand, are a little bit more tricky because they don't happen right away. Sometimes they can happen 3 days later or not at all. That's why we call food sensitivities a hidden source of inflammation. This is why it's so important that we look to the gut, because the symptoms tend to be more gut related. Things like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, gut pain. Those are the things that we typically see more with food sensitivities. And that's why we can't do things like elimination diets. They don't work. We have to test to really know if a food sensitivity is present or not.
I was just going to jump in there. So, doctor, what kind of tests can you take to make this difference between a sensitivity and an allergy?
Well, a food allergy, you're going to pretty much know because you're going to get that immediate response. In fact, most of these people are carrying around EpiPens for them because they know that they have that allergen or they know that they have the allergic response. But for a food sensitivity, what I love to use with my clients is called an MRT food sensitivity test. That stands for mediator release test. And what that means in English is that when we eat food, we're actually testing not is that food causing an allergic reaction to your body, but is that food causing an inflammatory response to your body? We have to understand you're not what you eat, you're what you digest, absorb, and assimilate. So when we eat these foods, we're not breaking them down. So, for example, one of my tests when I did mine, we're measuring 170 different foods and chemicals. So we're really measuring everything. Garlic came up on my test. So here are going to tell an Italian guy he can't eat garlic for 3 months? Yes, if you want to be healthy. So what we do in that time is we lower inflammation in the gut. We get things more balanced. We heal ourselves. So 3 months later, we can add that food back in, and then it typically is okay at that time.
So can a food sensitivity or allergy be mistaken for other illnesses?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the biggest problems we have. So many people are sick, and they're sick all the time, and they can't figure it out, even when they're eating healthy, because of that reason. We're getting different symptoms, like I mentioned before, whether it's a skin rash or something in our gut, and it's not something that we think of. We're not thinking of foods as the actual hidden source. And even doctors are doing that. They're not going to the food. They're not testing the right things. So again, whenever we have a specific symptom, we have to think outside of the box. We have to actually test. And that's my mantra. Test, don't guess. Look to the gut. Hippocrates said it best. It's the cause of all disease. And when you do that testing, you're going to uncover what your true sources of food sensitivities are and those hidden sources of inflammation in your body.
So let's say you don't have the ability to have these tests. Let's say your insurance won't cover it. You can't afford it. What can you do for yourself at home? Like, can you make a daily list of what you're eating and then try and assess how what you're eating may show up in your symptoms and then exclude them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. In fact, I do that with all my clients before we even start. We do a 3-day food diary because I want to see exactly what foods you're eating and then what response is that having in your body, whether that's a physical symptom or an emotional symptom. Maybe we're feeling anxious. Maybe we're feeling depressed. Maybe we're feeling tired. So I think that's a really important thing to do because we can make that correlation. But there are typical foods that we have to look out for. The big ones, things like milk. Milk is such an inflammatory drink for most children. In fact, it's the #1 allergy in children. And when children drink that, it's the casein in that milk. There's 20 times more casein in cow's milk than there is in human milk. And that casein, it's linked to certain causes of cancer. Plus, what it's going to do is going to wreck the gut. It causes leaky gut, lots of mucus. So that's one that we want to avoid. Another one would be peanuts. Like I mentioned before, many people think that the protein in the peanuts is causing the reaction, and that's definitely a part of it. But the hidden source that people don't talk about a lot is that peanuts are loaded with mold. Mold, things like aflatoxin, it's a cancer-causing fungus. And what happens is when you eat these peanuts, which have all this mold in it, and what they do is they take like all the moldy peanuts, they mash that up into the peanut butter because we can't see it. So we're eating this, and the body, when you ingest it, it attacks that mold and creates inflammation. And there's other typical ones, things like eggs, wheat and gluten, soy, fish, shellfish. Those are the ones we got to watch out for.
Right. Just in 10 seconds, what's the biggest reason you give people for getting sugar out of their diet?
Oh, that's a great one. You have to add in foods that strengthen your body. I want you to think green juice, green smoothies. These are the core of a strength eating diet. They're loaded with minerals like magnesium. And when you're addicted to sugar, like I was for so many years, the biggest thing is a magnesium deficiency. Add those foods in, the good will outweigh the bad. Watch those cravings go away in a few weeks.
Dr. Daryl Joffrey, thanks for your expertise.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Meta has said it plans to pull news from Facebook and Instagram in Canada. The decision is a response to a new law in that country that requires tech giants to pay news publishers for content. That law is expected to take effect in Canada in 6 months. The San Antonio Spurs selected France's Victor Wembanyama. I knew that I would get it eventually, with the top pick in Thursday's NBA draft. The amazing 7'4" tall center landed in San Antonio Friday and will be formally introduced by the Spurs Saturday. Wembanyama was emotional at many moments during his selection at the draft.
It's just accomplishing something that I've been dreaming of, my whole life. Hearing that sentence from Adam Silver, I've dreamed of it so much.
Alabama star Brandon Miller went second to the Charlotte Hornets, followed by G League Ignite star Scoot Henderson. The rest of the top 5 were a pair of twins, Amon and Asur Thompson, who were drafted by the Houston Rockets and Detroit Pistons, respectively. It's amazing. Shaquille O'Neal has already conquered the NBA. Now he's gearing up to show off his musical skills to fans in Texas. We'll explain what he's up to next. Plus, some Starbucks workers say they're going on strike. We will explain why. And as we near the end of June, we have officially entered the summer movie season. One new action comedy that's grabbing audiences is Kings of LA.
My whole life I've been running from something. I'm tired of running.
In theaters for a limited run, the film follows a young man in South Central Los Angeles as he struggles to keep up with changing socioeconomics and demographics in his community. It's one of several movies premiering this week. Other new films include Clean, Wonderwell, Maximum Truth, and Shiros on Paramount+. Now we're going to take a quick break. You're streaming CBS News. Welcome back to CBS News. I'm Catherine Herridge in Washington. Here's a look at our top stories. An investigation is now underway in the North Atlantic Ocean to figure out what caused the apparent implosion on the Titanic submersible and the deaths of all 5 on board. The U.S. Coast Guard says it appears the sub suffered a catastrophic incident after losing contact on Sunday. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled Friday that the federal government has the authority to prioritize which migrants are subject to arrest and deportation. In a lawsuit, Texas and Louisiana had argued authorities should be able to deport any person who crosses the border illegally. Plus, President Biden signed an executive order Friday expanding access to contraception. It specifically gives Americans more access to over-the-counter contraception. It also expands access to affordable contraception to service members, veterans, federal workers, and college students. 2024 Republican presidential hopefuls are gathering in the nation's capital to court hundreds of the party's most influential evangelical leaders, with Saturday marking 1 year since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Abortion is clearly taking center stage at this year's Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference.
You give me the privilege to serve as your president. We will stand every day without apology for the unalienable right to life.
I ran as what I am, an unabashedly pro-life Republican. Thank God Almighty for the Dobbs decision.
CBS News political contributor and Washington Post deputy politics editor for campaigns, Sean Sullivan, joins us now. Okay, Sean, so what are some of the main themes that we can expect to hear from the candidates at the conference?
Well, Catherine, as you mentioned at the outset, abortion is a really big focal point right now. There are a lot of activists who are wondering where this crop of Republican candidates wants to go next when it comes to abortion laws. We are almost at the 1-year mark from the point that Roe v. Wade was overturned, and you've seen a lot of pressure from activists to say, okay, that ruling, that Dobbs ruling last year did not end this debate. We want to further restrict abortion rights. So there was a lot of talk at this conference about supporting a 15-week abortion ban. That was something that Mike Pence, one of the candidates, called on all of his opponents to get behind in this race. We haven't seen that happen yet. So this did sort of delineate some of the differences between these Republican candidates. And of course, Donald Trump, the former president, the clear polling leader in this race, is going to speak tomorrow night at this event. And I think there are a lot of activists who are wondering exactly where he stands on the issue of abortion as well.
Okay, so let's take that a step further. Why is a group like Faith and Freedom Coalition so important to these candidates?
Well, a group like Faith and Freedom, and more broadly, religious conservatives, Christian conservatives, play a very big role in the Republican nominating process. They were key to Donald Trump's victory in 2016. They are key in a state like Iowa, which is the first state in the nominating process for Republicans. These endorsements that a lot of religious conservative leaders will sometimes make in these campaigns really does matter, because a lot of followers look to them to see which candidate they should get behind. So this is a really, really key gathering. And I think that's why we see virtually every major candidate, every major Republican candidate in the race right now is appearing at this event.
And just in the last few seconds, did Chris Christie get a mixed reaction at the event?
He did, and he's been very critical of Donald Trump. He got booed at this event, and I think he tried to send the signal that, look, I'm willing to go into places where there are a lot of Trump supporters. I know I'm going to get booed and jeered, but I am going to sort of stake my place as the chief Trump critic in this race. He sort of went after Trump on grounds of morality today. So it remains to be seen whether there's an audience for that. Right now, it doesn't look like there really is much of one. This is a party that is really dominated by Trump, but it looks like he's going to continue to go after the former president.
Sean Sullivan, thank you very much for your analysis this evening.
Thanks.
Thousands of Starbucks employees at more than 150 U.S. locations will strike in the coming days over pride decorations in their stores. The union representing the workers claim the company has banned displays celebrating the LGBTQ community. The Seattle-based coffee chain says it has done no such thing and is blaming the union for spreading misinformation in the middle of labor negotiations. The clash over pride displays comes as Target and Bud Light both face opposition from conservative customers for their support of the LGBTQ community. Well, 29 teams in Major League Baseball celebrated a Pride Night this month, except the Texas Rangers. The Rangers have never hosted a Pride Night in its history and do not sell any Pride merchandise at its stadium or online shop. The team hasn't said why it doesn't celebrate Pride, but it has said this, quote, "Our commitment to make everyone feel welcome and included in Rangers baseball." Saturday marks 2 years since a deadly condo collapse in Surfside, Florida. You'll remember 98 people were killed when the Champlain Towers condo complex came down. Families of the victims are still grieving from their loss of their loved ones, including Michael Noriega. His 92-year-old grandmother was the oldest person killed in that disaster, and he showed CBS News the rosary she was clutching when her body was found.
When the homicide detectives first gave my family and I the news, of course, we were all weeping because our fear had come true. And these rosaries were tangible representations of the legacy that she left behind of love.
Federal investigators blame construction defects for the building's pool deck, and they say that's likely contributed to the collapse of the building, but the investigation continues. New research shows cases of type 2 diabetes are on the rise worldwide. It's estimated 529 million people currently live with the condition. But findings published in a medical journal called The Lancet show more than 1.3 billion people will be diagnosed by 2050. Research cites systemic racism and insulin access in low and middle income countries for these skyrocketing rates of disease and death. Shaquille O'Neal is known to most of us as a basketball legend, but for those who follow electronic dance music, he's also known as DJ Diesel. Here he is playing at the Lollapalooza in Chicago, and now Shaq has launched his own EDM festival. Tickets went on sale Friday. Prices aren't too bad. They range from $50 to $140. For context, Coachella tickets started at $500. Shaq's event is September 16th and will be held in Fort Worth, Texas. Before we go to break, here's a look at what's trending online. Fans are obsessing over the new season of Black Mirror. The series returned to Netflix for the first time in 4 years last week. The sixth season covers topics like war, wildfires, the financial crisis, the rise of artificial intelligence, and the pandemic. The all-star cast includes Salma Hayek and Aaron Paul. Rihanna is stepping down as CEO of her lingerie brand, Savage X Fenty. According to Vogue Business, Hilary Super, former CEO of Anthropology Group, was appointed to take over. Rihanna will remain the company's executive chair. Keep it right here. You're streaming CBS News.
You're wide awake. Hope you're wide awake. When I come into your town, I wake the whole entire state. Said I hope you're wide awake.
That was Grammy Award-winning DJ and producer Kid Capri and his song Wide Awake. Capri is well regarded as one of the true pioneers of DJ culture. He's produced for hip-hop legends like Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, and 50 Cent. And Kid Capri joins us now to discuss 50 years of hip-hop and the BET Awards, which are being held this Sunday. Thanks for being with us. So just basic question, why is it important to celebrate hip-hop and its contributions?
Well, at one time, when it first started, it was told that it was just noise. It wasn't going to last. It was here for the moment. The older people didn't get it. To be here 50 years later, and it created opportunities for different people, opened doors for different people, kept certain people out of trouble, and made a generous amount of money to the culture, from the culture, to see this 50 years later, it's a monumental time, and it showed how it's stuck with everybody, and everything comes to it, from country to reggae to classical music, everything comes to hip hop. So that's why it's so strong and so worldly. And that's the reason why I stayed and remained.
I just want to pick up on something you said right there. But first, you said it opens doors for people. I want you to tell me a little bit more about that and sort of how hip hop today compares to, 50 years ago.
Well, I haven't had a job in 35 years. I haven't worked with anybody, but, my business, I've done what I've done. I work with people, but I haven't worked for anybody as getting up to go to a job. And hip hop provided that for me. At one time, I worked in 9 different supermarkets. I worked in the bookstore. I worked in the shoe store. I sold stuff on the street. I went and walked dogs. I shoveled snow. I did all kinds of things before I had a name. And I was doing this while I was DJing. I used to take care of underprivileged children. I used to sit in councils, meetings of women that was raped and try to help them with trying to find give them suggestions on how to cope with what they was dealing with. So I did all that before I had a name. So I was already seasoned to appreciate once I got where I was,
I'm hearing you say that really it helped create this entrepreneurial spirit, right? People could really create their own businesses and their own sort of platforms.
It's been happening for a long time, for a while. And, look at all the different people, Queen Latifah and Dr. Dre and all these different people. Some of these people are billionaires, you know what I'm saying? And it came from hip hop music. And of course, all these other things come because you lend your name and your celebrity to these things. And so all these other, opportunities may happen, but it all stems from what you did in hip hop. If you was a rapper, if you was a DJ, if you was a break dancer, whatever it was that you was in hip hop, it eventually grew to take care of you, your family, and create generational wealth. And that's what this is about.
Oh, that's a great sentiment. So looking ahead to Sunday's BET Awards, who are your picks for the best male and female artists?
Oh, you know what? I don't have any best picks. I just see everybody have a good time and everybody win. And because when one win, we all win. And that's the mentality that we got to have. It shouldn't be a selfish thing. It should be a selfless thing to where we all win. Everybody, and that's what keeps us going. We all get together. We help each other. We lift each other up, and they'll last. They'll last forever. And we could do that all the time and every day.
In the last few seconds, what do you think the next 50 years look like?
Even stronger. We're going to be on the moon DJing. And,
oh, really? That'd be amazing, right?
You'd be up there with R2D2, with somebody.
I'm putting it in my diary right there. That'd be pretty awesome.
Right.
Okay, Capri, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your perspective, especially that entrepreneurial piece to hip hop. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
And you can catch this year's BET Awards this Sunday at 8 p.m. on BET and on BET.com. Dr. Dre received the first ever Hip Hop Icon Award from the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. The California native accepted the honor this week during the organization's 50 Years of Hip Hop celebration. The rapper said music gave him an outlet to be creative and to be heard. Fellow artist Snoop Dogg presented Dr. Dre with the award.
Dre, you my brother. It's an honor to know you, to work with you, to hang out with you, and to present you with this very first ASCAP Hip Hop Icon Award.
Dre, whose real name is Andre Young, has a career that spans 4 decades. SpaceX successfully launched an uncrewed Falcon 9 rocket Friday morning.
1, ignition, and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Starlink.
SpaceX says this was the 8th launch and landing for the Falcon 9 first stage booster. The rocket released 56 satellites into orbit. In just under 4 years, SpaceX has attempted 242 launches. As couples across the country prepare for summer wedding season, inflation is driving up their expenses, including wedding dresses. Elise Preston shows us what some brides are doing to cut costs.
Here it is. Bride-to-be Georgia Etheridge is beaming in the months ahead of her big day.
It looks so beautiful.
Her perfect pearly fit.
Here she is.
Thanks to a secondhand gown.
And what's the story of your dress? A bride who had planned her wedding and then COVID happened. So this dress actually had never been worn to a wedding. So now I'm giving it its first chance.
Etheridge is part of a growing number of brides across the country finding bliss in pre-loved wedding dresses.
The bridal industry standard is all sales are final. You simply cannot exchange your dress.
In 2021, Sarah Gabor opened her Beverly Hills consignment shop, Love Twice Bridal.
Why are brides turning to secondhand dresses?
Well, there's been a shift in the market, I think, as far as value. The girl who's shopping nowadays, she's typically paying for the gown herself. And then sustainability. There's 2,300 gallons of water are used to produce one wedding dress.
2,300 gallons of water for one dress.
Yes.
The trend is catching on. Sales of white cocktail and special occasion dresses are up 23% this year compared to 2019 at secondhand retailer ThredUp.
What did your fiance say when you said, hey, honey, I saved $4,000?
I mean, he basically just gave me a high five.
So special.
The soon-to-be Mrs. Stevens is putting the thousands saved towards other wedding details.
I mean, it's beautiful.
Thankful her storied gown is now part of the fabric of her love story.
Like the sisterhood of the traveling wedding dress.
Elise Preston, CBS News, Beverly Hills, California.
Generation Z is already taking on mortgages. The group includes those born between 1997 and 2012. Last year, they made up more than 20% of mortgage requests in cities like Salt Lake City, Oklahoma City, Birmingham, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and Louisville. In historically less affordable cities, Gen Z still lags behind. They made up less than 10% of requests in cities like San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. 30% of 25-year-olds own their own home in 2022. That's slightly more than millennials and Generation X. One man's trash could be your next treat. Coming up, why some restaurants and food businesses are turning to upcycling. I'm not sure about that. You're streaming CBS News. A pair of SEC rivals will take each other on in this year's College World Series. The Tigers punched their ticket to the championship series by beating top-ranked Wake Forest in the double elimination round. And while the Gators and Tigers are in the same conference, the two teams have yet to face each other this season. The championship winner will have to win a best-of-3 series, which begins Saturday night in Omaha, Nebraska. You may have heard of something called upcycling. It's typically reserved for secondhand clothes or thrifted furniture. Now some chefs in America are upcycling food. But don't worry, it's not about using food that's gone bad. A restaurant in San Francisco takes those misshapen peppers no one apparently wants to buy and puts them on pizza. An ice cream company in Portland uses leftover cocoa pulp from chocolate production to make their chocolate gelato. The goal is to help save some of the roughly 34 million tons of food that's wasted in the U.S. every year. Thanks for spending your hour with us. We're always glad to see you. And I am Catherine Herridge in Washington. Coming up next, it's 48 Hours. You're streaming CBS News.